Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you. And hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where on the continent you are at. My name is Andy Okon, and I'm the Programs Manager for Africa with Open Contracting Partnership. And I'm welcoming all of you to our first community call for 2022, where we'll be speaking on effective project monitoring and data use for open contracting in Africa. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat sections. We'll be taking notes during the session. If you have any questions and any comments to make, please keep the chat box active and we'll get to all of your questions after our speakers have finished their presentation. So, like I said, go ahead to introduce yourselves in the chat. And from our Africa team today, I have myself here, Sophie, who will be joining us a little later, and Carrie, our head of country programs, is here as well. And today it is our pleasure to introduce you to our new head of Africa, Edwin Muhumuza. So I will put him on the spot and give him the floor to introduce himself. Edwin?
Thank you very much, Andy. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, very glad to be part of this community and also to participate in our first community call of this year. It's been a challenging last 2 years. We hope in the near future that these community calls could go back into the in-person engagements. As you've heard, my name is Edwin Muhumuza, currently the head of Africa at the Open Contracting Partnership. I previously worked at the PPDA, or the Public Procurement Authority in Uganda, which is the regulator for public procurement, in which I headed the Directorate of Corporate Affairs, and I was responsible for e-procurement, other initiatives like sustainable procurement, as well as open contracting, but also partnerships with both state, international, and non-state actors. So I'm glad to bring that background to the work that OCP is doing, but also to the very good work most of you are doing in your different communities. Today's community call is an important one, as most of you will know by now that OCP is very interested in having procurement reforms that are heavily informed by good quality data. And for that good quality data to happen, we need to have certain systems and tools in place. We've been promoting the open contracting data standards as a good and best practice to incorporate in the work that different procurement regimes do. We've seen the importance of that with the uptake of e-procurement across many jurisdictions around the continent. There are mixed results, of course, on that, but at least there's good steps in the right direction. Today's call also is one of our initiatives to allow the different communities that we deal with to speak to each other and learn from each other, so as to bring together civil society and non-state actors, government agencies, the international development agencies, to learn and as they speak from each other. Today we are going to hear from a very resourceful group, Dataphyte, and they are taking just data for data's sake, but using it to monitor projects. Again, that's a very important thing, because at some stage, the data that we collect or the systems that we build are not an end in themselves. They are means to a certain end. And so that end should be in ensuring good outcomes from best practices in procurement. And so I am very glad that we have a team that's doing that in Nigeria, and they're going to share their experiences today. And I hope all of us shall deeply engage and learn something from the meeting. As Andy said, this is the first of many such calls in the coming future. And so I wish you very good deliberations, and please let's keep these discussions going. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Edwin, for that presentation and for introducing yourself. And of course, you're welcome to the Africa community. And now I'll head back to sharing my screen. As you know, at OCP, we always try to make our calls very interactive. So the next question I have for everybody on the call is I'm dropping a link on the chat section. I'd like you to click on that link to answer the question that you can see on your screen at the moment. What is most essential to you? What do you think is most essential for effective project monitoring? I'll give everyone about 2 minutes, just a short answer, and then I'll present our findings before we dive deeper into today's call. If anyone has trouble accessing the link, please let me know. So what I will project now is our results. If you have any trouble accessing the answer link, please let me know while I go ahead to present our results in the next slide. So your answers are loading, and that's what I'm trying to show on my screen. So thank you. People have started putting in. We've received 7 responses so far. Access to good information on projects. Accountability appears twice. Interesting. Data and information, which is related to the first answer there. Coordination. Someone seems to think coordination is very essential, and available information. So I think so far with the answers that have come in, the big trend we can see here is obviously access to information. We're seeing effective communication here. We're talking about the availability of data. So I think the biggest thing we're seeing here is data and information. Access to reliable procurement data that shows project details from type, amount, contractor, project status, contact details. That's a very detailed answer. Thank you for pouring in all of those answers, because this will definitely steer the conversation that we're having later today in the right direction. So keep those answers coming in, and we'll project them again at the end of today's session while I head back to our slide deck and talk a bit about our Africa community. So the goal of our Africa community call and all the programs that we do around Africa is to build a strong community of practice. OCP is not aiming to be the be-all and end-all of open contracting, but we want all of our different partners across the countries in Africa to be able to carry out their open contracting reforms on their own with little or no support after we have provided resources and initial support to you. And of course, we want to catalyze the use of contracting data across the continent. So things like project monitoring are some of the things we look forward to seeing partners proposing to do, or telling stories using the contracting data that is available. And of course, we know with the EGP drive that's going on across Africa, thanks to the World Bank, there's a growing availability of procurement information. So the third thing we're really focused on is supporting partners in publishing good quality data. And with all of the OCP resources and our help desk, we try to ensure that, and we also think it's a good opportunity, the community is a good opportunity from you to learn from each other. So we also conduct peer exchange sessions, peer learning sessions, so we can have the agency in Uganda talk to the agency, the procurement agency in Uganda talk to the agency in Nigeria, and civil societies interact with each other to learn best practices from each other. So last year, most of you participated in our annual survey. So at the end of the year, we want to always hear back from you on what we're doing right and what is working. And one of the things that was so impressive from last year's annual survey was that Africa actually, with our work across the globe, Africa actually had the highest number of different countries represented in a single region. We had 17 in total. And you also had the highest demand for local and regional community building, which is why we have started initiatives like the Africa Community Call. And in some countries where there's a growing demand, we have also started country community calls in South Africa and in Nigeria as well. So what did we hear from you from our annual survey? You mentioned a couple of capacity and learning needs, and this was how they were prioritized. I'm going to emphasize the top 4. A lot of you were interested in advocating for open contracting. That is making a case to key decision makers around open contracting, because we all know that the buy-in is one of the most essential things about open contracting. And then you wanted to also know how to identify funding opportunities. And this is something we continue to share with our partners through our Africa community newsletter, which we send on a quarterly basis. And then you also want to know how to improve and co-create tools, your e-procurement systems, for example, developing OCDS portals, your contract registers, and visualizations. And our help desk works hand in hand with most of our partners to ensure some of these things. And we're also improving, this year, we're also going to be very deliberate about improving our EGP system support. And then finally, the 4th thing we heard from you was also connecting and collaborating with other members of the open contracting community, which platforms such as this allow us to do. And then these were the hot topics, and they're informing our upcoming community calls for the rest of the year. People wanted to learn more about e-procurement systems, wanted to talk more about anti-corruption and transparency, and we wanted to talk more about civil society monitoring and beneficial ownership. And these are some of the topics. It's really in line with OCP's strategy and goals for Africa, because these are conversations that we're actively having with different partners on how to even see things like the open contracting data standard be integrated in certain systems with the beneficial ownership data standard, for instance. So these are the things we've heard from you, and we're very deliberate in ensuring that we deliver this to you. But for today, we're really going to be focusing on civil society monitoring, project monitoring. And it is at this point that I will introduce our speakers today, Adenike Aloba, the managing editor at Dataphyte, and Charles Mba, the project manager at Dataphyte. We carried out some research work with them. We supported them through some research work across a number of states in Nigeria, monitoring projects using open contracting data. And they are going to discuss in detail their findings, the challenges, the successes they had, what outcomes, how that impacted the governance and procurement agencies. So I would open the floor and hand over to Adenike and Charles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. Good afternoon, everyone. We're very, very glad to be able to share our experience with tracking and monitoring, projects using open contracting data. And I'll allow Charles to start off and talk us through what that process was like for us, the activities that we carried out. And then I'll come back up and talk about lessons and challenges from our work. So, Charles.
All right, thank you very much, Adenike. In the last 2 to 3 years, we kind of realized that subnational governments in Nigeria, they've been signing up to open government partnerships, and they are gradually subscribing to budget and contract transparency. Just like Andy mentioned, this was enabled by, for instance, in Nigeria, the SIFTASH program. And we discovered that there were a lot of data, or there were quite a lot of data open that required our citizens to look at, and then kind of ask a lot of questions across contracts and then effective service delivery. But along the line, we also realized that because we are also an organization that is involved in a lot of capacity building, especially both at the federal and the subnational level, we discovered that to engage with these data sets, there needs to be some kind of capacity building for those at the grassroots to be able to engage with the data set and then demand effective service delivery or delivery of projects that we are budgeted for. Then we decided to, design a project that is built around establish red flags in these data sets, as well as monitor and report projects from these data sets. So we got support from the Open Contracting Partnership to do this in 3 states in Nigeria, which is one Ebonyi, the other Jigawa, and then the other Edo State. We actually decided this state to cut across at least 3 geopolitical zones in Nigeria, which Ebonyi is from the southeast of Nigeria, Jigawa from the north, and then Edo State from the south of Nigeria. So we were able to do this in 3 states. And in these 3 states, we were able to monitor at least 6 procurement projects that cut across health, education, water, and then electricity. Altogether, these projects worth about 50 billion naira across the 3 states. We decided to engage in this project, carrying out 3 basic activities. First of all, scraping open contracting data from the open contracting data portals of these 3 states, and then building the capacity of civic actors, which comprise of journalists, civil society organizations, and community-based organizations. We decided to bring these 3 persons together because we wanted not just to work with journalists, but wanted to build a community of practice. And we thought that this would involve dealing with those who are directly affected, even if they do not have like a formal organizational representation, but then, they are members of the community, looking for a way to incorporate them into the project. That's why we looked at these 3 categories: journalists, society organizations, then community-based organizations. And then the last part of the project was to carry out like an advocacy, like to support the trained persons. And then at the end, carry out like an advocacy where we came together to discuss the outcome of the project. After our scraping of the data set and then, disaggregating the data sets into different ministries, departments, and agencies, as well as local governments in the states, we realized that a lot of the persons we put together to train, about 80% of the persons we put together to train, they are not aware of the OCDS portal, as well as they do not even know how to make use of the data, analyze the data. Take, for instance, Link procurement project that has been contracted, was even budgeted for in the first instance, or it's just a misplacement of priority. So this kind of helped to justify our reason for, in the first instance, not just introducing them to the portal, but helping them, especially at this early stage, to scrape the data and then give it to them like in hand to be able to carry out this analysis. So in all, we're able to monitor 30 projects in the 3 states. We did 10 for Jigawa, 10 for Edo, and 10 for Ebonyi State. Across our project monitoring and tracking, we realized that why the participants or the persons we train, like the participants of the project, where they have been school exists that lacks infrastructure. Take, for instance, chairs, or where pupils sit on the floor. They just go to those places, take pictures of people on the floor, and then they don't even have the right channel to kind of forward their report or their findings. But with the data set that we scraped, they were not just able to go to the field and say, okay, a particular project was not done, a particular project was abandoned, or a particular sector of the community is suffering from lack of infrastructures. They were able to see, first of all, for instance, what has been done about this project. What is the current plan of this project? That's if the project actually been contracted for. What's the current plan of the project? Right? What are the plans around the project? First, for instance, how much was budgeted for the project? Who is the contractor for the project? Then also, because we had a trend of data, I was able to say, okay, for how long has this particular project been budgeted for across the years? And then was it actually implemented? Was it not implemented? So far away from just going to the site to look at if the project has been done or completed, which was the norm, before we had the training with the participants. They were now able to work effectively with data to say, okay, so amount was contracted, so person is the contractor for this project. This is the duration of the project, so that you know that after this particular duration, the project has not been completed, then we'll know who to go to account. Most importantly, the training also helped them to kind of, know who to forward their who to forward their complaints or their reports to. Why this was possible was because we were able to incorporate not just civic actors, but also those from the government side, which is the Bureau of Public Procurement. We engaged them right from the beginning of the project. We told them that we were going to start up the project. They were part of the training and the capacity building for the participants, telling them what they need to know about the various state procurement processes. And then for every investigation or for every outcome that we had, we tried as much as possible to relate to them, such that when we discovered some abandoned projects, we were able to relate to them, and then there was effective response in that regard. I would let my colleague Adenike to take over from here and then just throw more light and speak to the impacts and the lessons we learned from the project. Hello, Nike.
Hi, Adenike. I don't know if we've lost her, but I see her name in a couple of places. Charles, maybe you want to give an example of some of the stories that you were able to tell, the storytelling angle.
All right, okay.
Before Adenike joins us again. Thank
you. So I was actually, I wanted Adenike to do that, but it's not a problem. I can still take it. So we said we monitored projects across health, education, electricity, and then other infrastructural projects. For instance, in Ebonyi State, one of the states we work in the year 2018, the government budgeted for the construction of staff quarters in 40 secondary schools. And for each of those secondary schools, they budgeted, and in fact, they even contracted 20 million for this project, not just budgeted, but also contracted 20 million for this project. But as at 2020, when we looked at the OCDS data for Ebonyi State, we discovered that, okay, this is something we could actually work on, and then we mobilized, after our capacity building, mobilized people to look at. Due to limited resources, we were not able to look at the 40 schools. We were able to look at 6 of these schools. Now, going to 6 of these schools, we realized that in 2 of the schools, the projects were actually done, they were completed, but they were not being put to use. 1 year after the completion of that project. 1 year after the completion of the projects were not being put to use. Then, in 3 of the other schools, the projects were non-existent. While in 2 other schools, the projects were abandoned. Because we were working hand in hand with the Bureau of Public Procurement of the state, we kind of say, okay, this is the reason why we told you that we wanted to work with you. This is what we found out. And the head of the Bureau of Public Procurement at that time was like, no, that they are so very much keen on, ensuring that projects are completed. They give registered contractors projects to implement, that there are no abandoned projects in the states and the likes of that. And we said, okay, because we are not doing this thing we do some kind of name and shame, but the end goal of this is not to kind of witch hunt a particular government or to backbite anybody. We just want effective service delivery. We said, okay, it's not a problem. We'll still go about our investigation. We'll look at these things, and then we'll feed you with enough information, or we'll feed you with reports from our findings. And we carried out with this investigation, and we realized that this school has been abandoned for over a year. They started the project actually, they did it to like lintel level, did some kind of roofing, and then abandoned it for a whole year. And then the principal of the school confirmed that for a year they had not seen anybody in that school. They had not seen any contractors or any workers in the school, and it has been like that for some time. So we actually reported this. We didn't just do the reports. We wrote our reports, published on our news platform, but we also forwarded these to the Bureau of Public Procurement, right? What that helps to do is we already established a good relationship with the government arm of the government arm, meaning that we let them know that we're not there to fight anybody. Like I said earlier, we're not there to victimize anybody. We just want service delivery, because these guys have a whole lot of projects that they don't have enough human resource to even monitor all the projects. At least one of the guys from the Jigawa State Bureau of Public Procurement actually testified to this, that every year they have over 10,000 of projects and they cannot keep tab on all of these projects, meaning that they need to rely on civil society organizations and journalists to come on board and then, help also in tracking and reporting these projects. 2 weeks after our investigation, or 2 weeks after our reports, the principal of that particular school called us and said that work has commenced on that project again. And 3 months after our investigation, that particular project was completed. This is a project that has been abandoned for over a year, and a project that was supposed to, on paper, based on the duration of the project on the Ebonyi State Open Contracting Portal, supposed to take a year, but they were able to do this project, give and take. Even the stage the project went to before it was abandoned, I mean, they would have been able to complete that project in 6 months, both from the scratch to the end, right?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I see Adenike has been able to rejoin us. She had trouble with her internet connection that kicked her out. But Adenike, I give you the floor to shed some light on the stories, some of your findings, your outcomes, and challenges that maybe were experienced across the 3 different states, because I imagine you met something different in each state during the project monitoring exercise.
Andy, and apologies. Network just knocked me out just before I was called up, I heard. So I'll be talking through some of the challenges and lessons that we learned in doing this work. I won't go back to some of the things that Charles has said, but I'll raise examples from some of the things he has said to kind of substantiate my point. Is it okay if I share my screen? I just, highlighted a couple of things, and if I can, I'd like to share my screen.
Yes, please go ahead. I believe you're a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen. Thank you.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
All right. I've kind of highlighted this in a couple of yes statements. Yes statements because I think that our approach even to the challenges that we experience in doing open contracting work and open data work as a whole has to be positive, and it has to come from a yes, it's possible, yes, we can do it. In doing this work, let me start from, so I've kind of broken this into 3 sections. The first section will face the demand side of accountability, the demand side of democracy. The second slide is the supply side. And then the last one is kind of like a combination of both. And the first thing is open contracting is still nascent. And by nascent, what I mean is it's still largely new. It's still largely new. There's still quite a lot of it's not misunderstanding, it's just not knowing, especially at the subnational level. Across the demand side, there's still little knowledge of open contracting. Even the scope of open data as a whole, when you're talking about open data, open contracting, open procurement, just that entire spectrum, it's still really new. And so even from the training of stakeholders up to the tracking, where you actually go to the field to say, oh, this is what we're doing, what do you know about this? The first reaction you get from people and even from stakeholders is, what exactly are you talking about? And so, yes, open contracting is still new. There's still a lot of, so in terms of training and capacity building work, there's still a lot that needs to be done around that. And I imagine that if it's true for Nigeria, it's also likely true for African countries, especially, sometimes some of these conversations we have, they're happening at the central, they're happening at the national. And so there's need to kind of break it down, break it into pieces, and take it into the subnational level. So yes, open contracting is still new. There's still a lot of, not a lot of knowledge around what it is and what it can do for democracy, for accountability, for transparency. Next, very connected to the issue of open contracting still being new is that there's still a need for capacity building. Remember, I'm speaking about the demand side of accountability now. I'm talking about stakeholders like civil society. I'm talking about stakeholders like the media. I'm talking about stakeholders like change agents in, in the society, change agents, in the spaces. There is still a lot of capacity building that is required, even when there's awareness. Even when there's awareness, stakeholders don't know how to interact with data, what to do with it, mining of data, cleaning it up, even making sense of the data. So, it's clear that not only do we need advocacy around making data open, we need training around what to do when the data is actually available. Because stakeholders don't know how to interact with data. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know, even when they can see it, it's difficult to track, okay, what does this say about my community? Again, you'll notice I'm talking community, I'm talking subnational, because I think that it's open for debate. We can have that conversation, that the most effective impact that open contracting can have is at the grassroots level. I think that it should be a groundswell that comes from the grassroots up to the top, as opposed to coming from national down. Again, because contracting issues are community level. Most of the time, contracting projects and things like that are community level, they're community based. So the groundswell should be from the grassroots up to the top, as opposed to be, just conversations and things that are happening at the center. So yes, there's still a lot of capacity building that is required. I think Charles, if you give him a chance to say, he'll say that even taking 3 days to do training was not enough. Because what we found was, even with the CSOs on ground, the people at the subnational level, we needed to literally handhold. And there's nothing wrong with that, again, because we already established that this is new. It just says that in planning for that capacity building, it has to be practical. And I don't just mean this in terms of how we design training materials, or how we design training tools that we use. I mean that there has to be a measure of hand holding. There has to be a measure of, okay, this is the data. Do you understand what you're looking at? And this is me just kind of getting simple with it. This is the data, this is what you're looking at, this is what you should be looking out for. Do you notice this? This is important. And then when tracking has happened and change agents have gone to the field and they've come back, again, just as we're doing on this open call, there's need to sit down. What did you find? What do you think is important? Where else do you go with this? So there's still a lot of capacity building required. Again, I'm reiterating that I'm still talking about the demand side of the work. And this is my final yes on this slide. It's that there is impact. And I think it's important for us to know this, to own it, and to design our work and to face the challenges that we find on the ground from this perspective, that there is still impact. Charles has shared with you how projects that had been abandoned for over a year, the government quickly went back to it. And even where the impact is not as big in terms of, an immediate, response to either going back to the field or going back, we have to be able, and I think this is important, to be able to track to break down what impact means, if you allow me to put it that way. We have to be able to say the fact that government responded is an impact. The fact that BPP is willing to partner is an impact. The fact that, and we found in our experience that contractors were willing to open up. I think that's how we found out. I think it was in a Boeing that they were, instead of the stipulated amounts that were supposed to be released for a contract, for a contracting work to start, those amounts were not being released and contractors were being asked to use their money to do it. So sometimes it's not, what we're finding, it's not always that contractors have colluded with government to make sure that people don't get what they need. Sometimes the contractors themselves are handicapped. And when we met a number of them, they opened up and they said, you know what, it's not because we don't want to do this work. It's simply because we've not been mobilized. And they're asking us to go and do this to get mobilized. And it's difficult because sometimes even when you do it, the contracts can be taken away from you. Again, that in itself, just having that knowledge we didn't have before we went to the field. That's an understanding we didn't have before we went to the field. Because what this tells us in our own design table when we're designing the next project is there is need to have engagement with contractors themselves. Let's understand why it's so difficult to achieve, to do the work that they've been called to do. So yes, there is impact. Sometimes it's not that EFCC has carried somebody and the person has been arrested. That will be nice. Sorry, just 1 second. Just Okay. Apologies. Light just went off and I'm trying to just manage with a spotlight here, but it was kind of getting really into my eye, so I had to move it. So yes, we need to be able to measure impact, the big ones, yes, but also the small ones. We need to be able to measure impact in the lessons we're learning. And I said in this slide, it may be slow. Sometimes it is steady, it is unsteady, slow and steady. Well, sometimes this journey is unsteady, but there is impact, especially at the subnational level. Let me run quickly and move forward to the second slide. Yes, so supply side. Yes, data exists, but it is not enough. I say here that the supply side is still playing catch up on making data available. So oftentimes, what that means for accountability is that the deed has already been done. The damage has been done. The work has been done already. The contractors have probably done, like we found in Jigawa, where there was high level of project accomplishment, but very low in terms of quality. That's in Jigawa. That's what we found. There was high level of, most of the projects had been done or they were being done, but the quality was debatable. But the truth is, it had been budgeted, the money had been spent. We're coming to look at something that it's almost like, okay, so now what do you want me to do about it? Because, this project is over, it's done with, we've handed it over. So yes, it is true that the data exists, but it is not enough. And that the supply side is still playing catch up in terms of making data available. And interrogations or interactions with BPP substantiated the facts across the 3 states that we were in. You had conversations of, oh, sorry, is that what you saw? Oh no, the data was not updated, or this was missing, or oh no, that wasn't supposed to be part of that. And sometimes you just have to go back again. There's lesson for demand side here, in that we do have to be careful to ask questions. I think Charles ended his conversation on saying it's not always antagonistic. And the truth is, if we always go forward with a fight, you people are doing this, people are doing that, we may not get the response that we need, and we may not be able to do number 2 on this slide appropriately, which is capacity building. Especially across the states, the supply side still needs lessons on the practice of open data, including open contracting. When you're uploading data, what is required? And I know that there is conversation, and I think with some people in the room, we've had conversation around, oh, it's intentional. They really don't want to do this. But we're finding that, yes, there is a level of intentionality where details, even on open contracting portals, are vague, but we're also finding that sometimes they don't know better. They don't know how to do better. So in approaching this from a collaboration perspective, as opposed to an antagonistic hero and villain perspective, may help us to actually achieve more, especially from the supply side. My final point on this note is, yes, there is still resistance. And it is only fair to say that there's resistance. If we don't say that, we would not be fair and we will be lying. The more contracting data is used to demand accountability, the more stubborn, the more recalcitrant, they dig in deep. And people that had been talking to you openly before, once they find out that you're found fault or you have questions around something, that they just kind of lock up, to use that colloquial term. So yes, there is still resistance. Recently, we did a work around, open contracting in Ibadan, your state. And Charles, if you can put the link of that story in the chat as well. And 2-3 days after, we got a letter from the state, saying, oh yes, they were lying, and we're going to sue you guys, and all of that. That's a threat in itself. And they're saying, so yes, those things will happen. And I think it's important that we're aware that yes, you may get sued, yes, you may get threatened, yes, you would even have some people, well-meaning people, calling you to say, you know what, maybe you should take it easy a little bit, maybe. But again, this is where capacity building for the demand side is critical. If your work is good and done, no case can be taken against you. If you have used the data appropriately and you've let the data speak and not spoken for the data, again, these are capacity building needs that we're finding, where people go to the field and they have preconceived notions. They just think the government is not working and they are trying to make the data say that. So if your work is complete and your work can stand by itself, yes, the threats may come, yes, there may be challenges in terms of people calling you out left and right, but if the work speaks for itself. I mean, this is not a conversation for discussing safety for our work. Otherwise, I would have gone into, yes, where the threats are physical, or there are certain things, then you need to put certain things in place where you can be hacked or where you can be attacked. You need to be safe. If you're going to localities that you're not aware of, this is outside of the remit of this conversation, but I think it's important, especially if we're talking about resistance. If you're going to a community, tracking a project in a community where you don't know anyone, please be safe. Please do some kind of reconnaissance. Get someone to go there, find what do we call these people now? Fixers that you can trust, just so you're safe. But yes, there is still resistance. Now let me go to my very last slide. I promise it's my last slide. And then we can take questions and have conversations. I said, yes, collaboration works and is needed. No one person can do this work. What we did with Dataphyte's work of tracking, of monitoring, is to collaborate with actors on the ground. So for each of the states that we went to, we didn't go there and announce ourselves, the big boys have come. No, that's not what we did. We actually sought collaboration from civil service, from civil society community, from the media community. We sought collaboration even with state actors. So collaboration works. I mean, at the very minimum, even for your budget for tracking, you are better off getting someone who lives in Ondo to do the work in Ondo than transporting someone from Abuja or Lagos all the way to Ondo to track a project, and then they have to go back. So, I mean, even looking at it from in that granular sense, collaboration works, and collaboration is needed. Sharing knowledge, reviewing actions, designing interventions, like the community call we're having here, where Dataphyte is just sharing, this is what we're found, this is what we're learning. This is critical if this work is going to be advanced. Now we're learning that there is need to engage more deliberately with contractors to even get a sense of what is going on. Now we're learning that there is need to take a collaborative approach to dealing with the supply side of democracy, to dealing with the supply side of accountability, that there is need to take a more, almost less antagonistic approach to bringing the lessons, to saying, to advocating for publishing of their data, for publishing of their contracting data. So it's critical for us to share knowledge, to review actions. It's critical for us to jointly design interventions. And I know this can be a little weird, especially because sometimes civil society, media, all of us, sometimes we are a little bit wired to be competitive. But I think with work of this scale and at this scale, collaboration is better. Collaboration is how we can do a lot with a little, is how we can do a lot in shorter time. I said, yes, citizens are stakeholders. And I feel like we need to reinforce this over and over and over again. Citizens are stakeholders. And I'll break it down. The people who are going to tell you whether or not they have used these facilities are citizens. And there is, because of just growing distrust with state actors, I can tell you that in our work, not just in the 3 focal states, but across, especially the Southeast, there's a lot is rising distrust against civil society actors and the media. So we need to be more deliberate about engagement with citizens. We can't fight for people that we're disengaged from. And they can't just, our engagement with them can't just be, here, we have tracked for you, take, go and do what you want with it. That can be the approach of our intervention, of our relationship with citizens. We need to engage with them, because they're critical for advancing open contracting. At the end of the day, when Dataphyte does its work and leaves their boy, and when several organizations here, when they do the work and they leave wherever they are, leave whatever community or grassroots community they've gone to, those people have to continue to monitor. It was when work restarted in the school project in Ebonyi, it was people who sent us pictures. It wasn't BPP. It wasn't BPP. It was, in fact, we were the ones who notified the Bureau of Procurement that, oh yeah, we noticed work had restarted. It was people. So we need them to be engaged. We need them to know that this is for them, and they need to engage, with the process. So whatever that means in terms of program design, whatever that means in terms of intervention design, in terms of how we want to plan our tracking, how we want to plan our monitoring, we have to know that the value chain of effectiveness is incomplete if we don't do citizen engagement. And finally, the work is big and requires support. Nigeria has 774 local governments. 774. All of them getting some kind of project, some kind of every year. So the work is big, and this is me and then if you now split that over the ministries, if you split that over parastatals and the kind of works they're doing, it is big. No one would have thought that just printing of exercise books, it's not even the funding for free education. Just printing of exercise books can be so problematic. But what we found just looking at the contracting data of Oyo was, okay, wait a minute, how can you say, no, this doesn't add up? And then we started asking questions. Just printing of exercise books. If we then begin to drill down to feeding, for instance, the national homegrown school feeding program, if we then begin to drill down to activities, then there are so many multiple layers. So the work is big. And one of the ways, it's one of the open contracting, I think, is one of the quicker ways to deliver democracy outcomes to people. It's one of the quicker ways for people to feel there's governance around them, that the government exists around them, to say, hey, guys, you're supposed to get this. What we found, especially with primary healthcare centers, is when you get there and you find the head of the unit and you say, oh, where is this? The person goes, we're supposed to get that. And sometimes it's like, oh, you didn't even know. And sometimes you get to them and you tell them, oh, this has been completed, it's supposed to be handed over, and they're completely blank because they just don't know. And so what we've done, and that's, you recall in my first slide, I talked about tracking impacts, tracking the big ones, but also tracking the small ones. I think that even people being aware that they're supposed to get this, that this is when it's supposed to be delivered, that it's supposed to have been handed over, even people coming to that awareness in itself is impact. And so, yes, it requires support. And I'm going to be frank on this call, because I believe Andy expects me to be, and say that that support is not just, we need support in terms of money to do the work, to go everywhere that we need to get to. We need support in terms of collaboration, to be able to say, oh, this is working here. Can we collaborate with Ghana? And I feel like the ultimate value of data, it's in its ability to predict, it's in its ability to explain, it's in its ability to aid contextual understanding. So if I can say, hey, what's happening in Ghana? Hey, what's happening in Liberia? This is what's happening, that's working there. Perhaps we can take this model. Again, just that, cross-level collaboration is required, providing support, for that work. And to this end, as I wrap up my very long talk, I want to say that, Dataphyte is always open to collaborating to advance the work of open contracting, because we believe that this work is important, this work is critical, and it's one of the quickest ways to deliver democracy outcomes to people. Thank you, Andy. I hope I didn't overshoot my time.
No, I think you were just on time for us to be able to open the floor for participants. But we already have a few questions. And please, for everyone that's a part of the call, you can make use of the reactions button on your Zoom platform to raise your hand if you have a question, but I'll get into the ones that we already pulled out from the chat section. So Bartholomew Kinoti, pardon me if I've destroyed your name, I'm sorry. Bartholomew Kinoti said, had some comments. He had a couple of questions and had comments. He referred to your mention. There are three things here. He says, in the case of abandoned and stalled projects, was there any feedback from government officials? I think in your explanation, you may have answered that with the example from Ebonyi State, where people went back into the field, and in Oyo State, where the government challenged people. And just for everyone's context here, there are 36 states in Nigeria, and some of the states, as Charles mentioned initially, are in the southwest of Nigeria. Some are up north, and one is in the southeast of Nigeria. So yes, there was feedback from the government. Some people, they had some contractors return to site, and there were also government officials that challenged the work that Dataphyte had done. And then the other question from Bartholomew is, do community projects embrace public participation in Nigeria? And you speaking of contractors being handicapped, is that a result of project design, procurement, or both project design and procurement? So Charles or Adenike, who wants to go?
Okay, let me just, sorry, I kind of already said okay. Although perhaps Charles wants to speak to it first before I, just comment, especially around needs-based projects, procurement and contracting, and then just the extent of public collaboration. Charles.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just first of all speak to if contractors are actually being handicapped as a result of, lapses in project design and implementation. I'll just point out to a few examples in Edo State, for instance. In Edo State, they were supposed to construct 3 courtrooms in 3 communities, very close communities actually. Before they contracted that project, these communities were actually sharing one courtroom that was in one of the communities. So after the contract, they were supposed to contract in 3 different communities. So each community was supposed to have their own magistrate courts, after a period of 6 months. But after a period of 6 months, the magistrate court that was used by the 3 communities initially was reconstructed, and in fact, another building was constructed for them. But in the other 2 communities, nothing was done. And then we had to speak to the contractors. One of the contractors said that from the day of the award of this contract, he has been on the neck of the procuring entity in the state to show him where to implement that project. And up until the time we were having the conversation with him, he didn't know where the site for the implementation of that project was. So if the contractor does not know where the site for the implementation of that project was, then how in the first instance they even think of building a magistrate court where there is no location as to where that particular project is to be implemented? Okay, to point to another example, in Jigawa State, for instance, a particular basic healthcare center was constructed, and after a year, it was not being put to use. A year and 6 months, not just a year and 6 months. It was not being put to use. And then we had to speak with the, a representative of the Jigawa State Bureau of Public Procurement. That is called Jigawa State Due Process Bureau. And he said that what they do is, the first year, he said what is common in the state is that the first year, they procure the building itself. And then luckily, in the next year, they might now procure for, hospital facilities, healthcare facilities. So meaning that tentatively, after a year of completing a healthcare facility or a healthcare building, that healthcare building has to wait, be used by probably rats, lizards, and then before they now procure for healthcare facilities, hospital beds, and the rest. This kind of speaks to design and then implementation. The whole process of needs assessment of the community, or is it speaking to projects that are actually just being done and then nobody uses it? Take for instance the staff quarters in the various states that were actually built, and then for over a year nobody's using it. And each of those staff quarters were just like 3-bedroom flats. And then how many teachers are in that school? How many teachers would that particular building accommodate? I mean, was there a needs assessment that, that spoke to this, I mean, like, so somehow it has to do with both the design and then, the implementation of the project.
Yeah. I mean, if I could just, yes, there's across the value chain from design to implementation, there are obvious gaps. And I see that some people are commenting on the chat that yes, there's need to strengthen, oversight institutions in Nigeria. But to also answer the question that sometimes, yes, contractors are handicapped. Yes, they are handicapped because when they're done with the project, they don't hand over to the people. They hand over to the agency, whatever agency that, financed them to do the work. So in that regard, for instance, the person who wanted to go ahead and execute, who didn't have a site and was following up for a site. So yes, sometimes they are handicapped, but there is an obvious gap from project design to implementation. One thing that is clear to us is also that we need to start talking about the financing of states and how states are financed. Because where they build a project one year and they have to buy the instruments next year, and then they have to first budget for perhaps the personnel in another year, that's 3 years of just getting one primary healthcare center working. So obviously, these are tangential issues that connect to open contracting that we then can, again, design programming advocacy around. How are states financed? What do they focus their financing on? And things like that. Yeah. Sorry, Andy, I'm done.
Thank you, Adenike. I see a number of hands raised here. Keep your questions and comments coming, and if you want to speak, please raise your hand. But at this point, I would like Asabiru Musa Dibal to speak. Please go ahead. Is Asabiru
Okay.
there?
Hello. Good afternoon to you all. My name is Asabiru Musa Dibal. I'm the ICT specialist with ICRC, International Committee of the Red Cross. I have been on call on open contracted for quite a long. I've been receiving quite a lot of mails, but it has been so difficult for me to follow up and be part of the advocacy. It's quite an interesting presentation. A lot of insight, a lot of clarifications has been cited all over across. I'm very happy to hear such an advocacy going around. I, with a little knowledge of monitoring and evaluation, which I've been a part of for the past 5 years, I have an intention prior to before I joined the ICRC to be part of the advocacy. But it has been a lot of challenging for me. So to be precise for me, I would like to get a way forward how I can be a part of the advocacy. That is one. Secondly, I am from the northeastern part of the country, Borno State, to be precise. A lot of projects has been allocated from the road construction, facilities. Presently in Medigui, there are a lot of there are a lot of doctors' quarters, there are a lot of infrastructure which government has put in place. But all those infrastructure has not put in use for the past getting to 2 years now. Those infrastructures are fully completed, but no one is using those infrastructures. So actually, I would like to get to know how those data-centric can be channeled, how things are run on this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Asabiru. We'll be happy. It's good that you're now part of the open contracting community. In subsequent community calls, we are also going to cover making a case for open contracting to key government officials or to key decision makers across the continent. And I'm sure many of the participants here can speak to some of the challenges they have around making that case in the country. But project monitoring, continuous project monitoring, is another way that you can hold the government accountable in your society, in your immediate society. So now I would like to move to Daisy Omokunbe. Daisy Omokunbe, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to address this room. Let me say I'm quite impressed. My name is Daisy Omokungbe, Executive Director of Procurement Foundation. We are based in Abuja. I'm also the publisher of Technocrat Media Nigeria, based in Abuja as well. Listening to Adenike and other speakers so far, I must commend their efforts on working on Abadan project in Nigeria. And I want to say that we have experience in this area with our Follow the Project initiatives. A lot of issues that have been raised so far are reasons why projects don't get executed in Nigeria. The need for analysis in our communities are not there. So government just sit down and develop projects on their own. They design, and most of the time, these designs fail. Apart from the fact that there are corruption issues, there are issues of diversion of funds in the project execution in Nigeria. Now, I want to ask, in 2020, before my question, in 2020, we worked on the NDDC project with our Follow the Project. We also worked on constituency project in 2021 in Abuja and Ondo State. And we made a lot of discoveries that has to do with Abadan project not meeting community needs, project being funds being diverted by politicians and contractors, also contractors being handicapped in the way that has to do with the implementation of the project. Now, my question is, as concerning the issues and the challenges that Adenike raised, is Dataphyte the only organization being supported in Nigeria currently to work in this regard? Like she has said, one organization cannot do this work alone. So how can we bring other organizations on board so that they also get supported to work around this area in conjunction with Dataphyte? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I can answer your question. Thank you for your question. No, Dataphyte is not the only organization that's being supported. There are other organizations that are also actively working in the open contracting space in Nigeria. We have an organization called Follow Taxes, and there's PPDC, Procurement Monitor. Some of the team members are on this call as well from both organizations. And to name a few, there's another organization named CISLAC as well. And OCP also has an advocacy. We recently launched our advocacy support. I'll drop the link there, where organizations can actually apply for mini grants to support their advocacy, for mini grants of up to, I believe, $5,000 to support their advocacy work. So the link is there for everyone to please have a look at. We launched this last month. And if you scroll, you can write to us. You can either get specific training on advocacy. You can work with our advocacy toolkit. You can apply for a grant, or if you need to speak to the team directly, you can speak directly to us. And that's how we work. It's as per requests and opportunities that we see across different countries. I want to move to Dennis. Dennis had dropped some questions in the chat, and he raised his hand, but lowered it. So I don't know if he would want to go ahead and speak, or if I should read out the questions he dropped in the chat section. Dennis, sorry to put you on the spot. Well, would you like to go ahead and speak?
Hi there. Sure, I can ask.
Thank you.
I was wondering about what kind of information were you looking for when you were doing contract monitoring in terms of data correction, and how that helped you in terms of making a case? You talked a lot about making meaning of the data that was collected. So I wanted to make that connection. And then in addition, you talked about some duty bearers having difficulties or resisting to release information. Are there some remedies in regards to that, whether legal or otherwise? So for example, in Malawi, we have Malawi Human Rights Commission that is mandated to oversee the Access to Information Act, and you can go through them to have an external review, and then it can go up to the High Court if need be. So wanted to find out on you from Nigeria's case. Thank you.
All right, Adenika or Charles, do you want to answer that?
I'll let Charles speak to the details of what exactly we were looking for in the field and how we made sense of that. And then I'll speak to, the part about consequence for actions in terms of data, open data and access to data. So Charles.
Right.
Okay, so actually we're looking at...
We can get through to more questions, so you have 2 minutes for that. Thank you. There are lots of raised hands.
All right. Thank you, Andy. We're looking at data from the full value chain of the full procurement value chain. That's beginning from tender down to implementation. So we looked at, and for states that had data on needs assessment, in as much as we found very scanty data sets on adequate needs assessment. So we began from tender, bidding, contract awards, and then contract implementation. So the full procurement value chain, we try to, link these data sets together to see, okay, even from the instance, what was the duration for bidding? Well, how many bids did they receive? What kind of bidding process did the project actually pass through? It is the contractor that was actually given the project at the long run. Is the contractor registered? The contractor an active contractor in the based on various policy and contracting standard. We also interface budget data because we believe that the procurement process do not just happen. It stems from budgeting for that particular fiscal year, and then we try to link, okay, what's in the procurement data with what was actually budgeted for, to see if states were just actually intending to spend money that we are not actually budgeted for. So across this whole fiscal transparency value chain, we combine both the budget data, the procurement data, even audit data to an extent, and then as well as to an extent data from Corporate Affairs Commission, which keeps data about registered contractors in Nigeria.
I think network knocked him out, but I think I can finish his sentence to say all of that is what becomes the story. All of that is what becomes the story from the bidding up until the implementation and the interactions with the budget, the interactions with audit reports, the interactions with BPP requirements for project. That's what forms the story that is now told, that is now presented on a platform like Dataphyte. What we're finding is that open data is often connected. So in the place of doing open contracting, we're finding connections to beneficial ownership. And then we're finding, oh, somebody's person got this contract because of, so all of it is interconnected, and this is what forms the story that we tell. On the question of consequences for duty bearers not responding or being recalcitrant or unwilling to share data. So Nigeria has the Freedom of Information law. Nigeria has the Freedom of Information law, and civil society actors can write a freedom of FOI request, is what we call a freedom of information request, to any agency. However, across states, there are very few states who have domesticated that law. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has given two discordant judgments on FOIUs at subnational level. There's one that has said, oh yes, FOI is, once it's accepted at national, then it's everyone should use it. And then there's another that says states have to domesticate. And in terms of pursuing the legal pathway for getting answers, that's kind of where we are. So there's a lot of litigation in court. There's a lot of waiting on the courts to interpret. And I know someone has said on the call that there's need to strengthen oversight institutions. And I think the court is one of those. Outside of that, really, what we try to do in Nigeria,
30 seconds.
okay, this is it. What we try to do in Nigeria really is to be loud enough about it, and that's why the media is critical, to set an agenda on that issue. So when everyone is reporting about the same thing, sometimes you force the supply side to react. Sometimes that reaction is not nice, like you getting sued, but there is a reaction, which means they noticed. So that's, I think that's the extent. That's why I said it's slow work. Sometimes it's unsteady, but that's where we are. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Adenike. And to answer your question in the chat, Dennis, beneficial ownership is not yet part of the law, but our Corporate Affairs Commission is working closely with Open Ownership to publish the beneficial ownership register. They've gone really far in that project, and they're aiming for sometime in May to actually launch it. So I think that will eventually be supported by law. And now let me hand over. Some people have been raising their hands for quite a while. It's such an interesting conversation. I'll hand over to Masood Lado Sela. If you can unmute and ask your question or share your comments.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Andy, and good afternoon to you all, the participants. Builder Masood Lado Saleh is my name, and I'm calling you from Kano State. Well, actually, on monitoring is actually not only to ensure accountability, prudence, and transparency, but rather to also ensure quality project delivery. When you look at most of the projects we are executing, especially in the states and some of the federal government projects in Nigeria, you realize that many substandard building materials are used in the construction of those projects. And within no time, you will realize that the structures being built are not actually given the correct requirement and benefits to the citizenry. So actually, I don't know whether OCP is collaborating with some technical partners in the tracking of those procurements to ensure that quality project delivery is achieved. Again, you realize that in Nigeria, there are as many abandoned projects as the successes of our various governments. And this is barely due to non-participation of the CSOs in monitoring these projects. There may be monitoring from the side of the government, but actually is actually nothing to write home about. The project executing MDAs are not doing it well. And most of the Bureau of Public Procurements we have, they are only meant to issue certificate of no objections. They don't have the mandates to monitor the quality delivery of those projects. And even if those that have the mandates to monitor those projects, they don't have the sufficient logistics to cover them all. Another thing is lack of citizen engagement, as made mentioned by the presenter, the absence of appropriate logistics to those procuring, those regulators, that's the BPPs, some hidden and unaccountable tendencies of the project executing NDAs. Many of those project executing NDAs are hidden a lot of things. They don't want to open up, not only to OCPs, not only to CSOs, but even to the regulators, the BPPs. Sometimes the project existing MDAs, they don't make things open to, even to the BPPs. So there is need for those project executing MDAs to do to be often so as to ensure the accountability and other things like that. And the ignorance of our contractors. Sincerely speaking, I happens to be a desk officer registering contractors in Kano some times ago. And many of those contractors, especially the indigenous contractors, they are actually ignorant of even the way to execute and even the way to go about getting their payment and other things like that. And one thing, governments, almost all governments, almost all governments have issues with releasing payments to the contractors. There are many problems with releases. When you go to Ministry of Finances and Office of the Accountant General, you may come across so many payment vouchers, heap of them, non-payments. That is why projects are being abandoned. Thank you very much.
Very much. Thank you very much, Builder Masood. So now I will give Oluwa Sheun 30 seconds and Ambassador Godwin Kumai Akao 30 seconds. And just for clarification, someone in the chat has corrected me that yes, we do have beneficial ownership disclosure and transparency law. It's now part of the law in Nigeria through our Company and Allied Matters Act that was updated in 2020 and the Petroleum Industry Act, which was updated in 2021. So, more raised hands. So 30 seconds each person. Oluwa Sheun, Ambassador Godwin, and Bia Mukama, 30 seconds. So Oluwa Sheun, 30 seconds, please.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm speaking from Abuja, Nigeria, and I would like to speak from the contractor's point of view, because at the moment I would say I'm a contractor. I think it's important that for this meeting to be balanced, we should also hear the pains of the contractor. In Nigeria at the moment, like I wrote on the chat box, the only process that is transparent in public procurement is just the advertisement. Every other thing in procurement process in Nigeria is not transparent. The only thing you get to know is when the advert is placed. After that, you wouldn't hear anything about the contract being awarded. And this has in no small way affected the rate of abandoned projects in Nigeria. There is need for more engagement of the public stakeholders, not only the contractors, not only the public, not only the community, in the procurement process in Nigeria. You wouldn't know when or what criteria the person that was given a contract has been given the contract, despite the fact that you feel that there are other more qualified contractors or companies that could do the job better. Another thing is over-bloated invoices, over-bloated contracts that are awarded in Nigeria that the project itself cannot carry. You discover that things ordinarily that could make projects go round, I mean grassroots development, they just lump it into one single project, despite the fact that even the quality of projects implemented is poor. If you go around, you see that most projects are poorly implemented. They do a road, it won't last 3 months, it will be washed away. Also, you see that even when these projects are awarded, you discover that projects are awarded to cronies of politicians, cronies of people, civil servants. They really cannot owe them because it's a case of Paul collecting it, giving it to Peter. They are all birds of a feather. They are all children of the same parents. So they really do not give projects to qualified people. And if you are lucky enough to get a project as a contractor in Nigeria, you know that you have to pay with so much money, a different percentage. That is why the contractor is so much handicapped in Nigeria. You see that after borrowing money from bank, a contractor will also be made to pay with 10%, 20%, 30%. of their money for project they already borrowed money for from the banks. And at the end of the day, the contractors will also look for a way to do the job shoddily. They wouldn't want to do it qualitatively. So
All right.
by
Thank
and
you
large,
so much,
by and large,
Okay.
sorry, let me just conclude by saying that it's important that the effort of OCP is very, very good. But OCP needs to go a step further by making the procurement process actually transparent in Nigeria. They need to engage communities, they need to engage contractors. All stakeholders must be engaged in this light. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, Ambassador Godwin, if you can unmute yourself and speak. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess he just made a point that I was going to say. My name is Ambassador Godwin. I'm a community development charter champion all the way from Kaduna State. I'm in the grassroots with I'm in a village right now tracking a project, or UBEC project. What I just want to say is that one question I want to ask is, what are you really doing about the prioritization of projects being awarded? Are they really coming from the community to inform government budget, or are they really promises of politicians who just come in and just award project? Because you find out that there's a discord between the communities themselves and the project being executed to them. So I wish, I hope the OCDS will help communities, because a lot has been happening. The communities are not aware of what is even happening from the onset, and even to engage them, to even know what better means to move in for advocacy and engage in the process to achieve the desired result. So I hope OCDS will help, OCDP will help in this regard. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Yes, that's work that we're actively doing with different procurement agencies at both national and subnational levels. In Nigeria, the federal level has what we call NOCOPO, and open contracting data is being published there actively. They even publish data on COVID-19 as well, COVID-19 procurement. So I think the other challenge that we have seen, which is one of the things we're really focusing on and why we started our engagement with Dataphyte this year, is that we want to actually catalyze data use in the country. So we've seen the support from World Bank at continental level for the development of EGP systems, and then through the state fiscal transparency and accountability and sustainability project in Nigeria for subnational levels. So the data is actually being published, and that's why Dataphyte was able to even carry out this research, that there's data available. So it's now getting that data across to all the different stakeholders. And one of the things OCDS really tries to do that you mentioned is that we try to ensure that government is able to look at the data and see these are the needs of citizens and know how to prioritize citizens' needs as against what the government's priority is, so that those two are able to marry each other and you actually attend to citizens, because ultimately that is the end goal of every contracting project, for the government to be able to deliver services to its citizens. And being very conscious of time, we have 1 minute left, so I don't know if there are any closing remarks from our speakers, Adenike or Charles. I thank you all for making this such a very engaging session, and I'm hoping to hear from different people across the continent on how they want to carry out procurement projects, monitoring projects, how you want to collaborate across countries. We're already seeing some of that happening between Kenya and Nigeria, Ghana as well, South Africa, Uganda. So we're encouraging more and more of our community members to reach out so that we can help to make those linkages and provide support where we're able to. So any closing remarks, Adenike and Charles?
I mean, no closing remarks from me except to say thank you for allowing us to come and talk about our experience and what we've learned and doing the work. And we hope to do more. And again, we hope that as many people will be doing more of the work as well, so we can all come together and share knowledge. And for instance, we all know now that we need to engage with contractors as critical stakeholders the open contracting conversation. So yes, thank you very much, Andy. Charles?
Charles?
Okay, for me, I would just like to say to everyone, we should not relent, we should not be discouraged. Small wins matters. Let's just push this cause. Yes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for your time and for being such an engaging audience that stayed to the end, to the exact end of our community call. I will be in touch. I will share this recording and I will share details of future community calls that we'll be having in the coming months. And if you want to reach out, I will also share my contact details to everyone that has registered, so you can reach out to myself or Edwin, who is our head of Africa, on how we can support you in your open contracting reforms. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very
Bye.
much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.